When we talk about jealousy, we often do so in hushed tones, as if it's a shameful emotion we're supposed to pretend we've evolved beyond. But here's the truth, jealousy is one of the most human experiences we can have. It's not a flaw. It's a signal. And when someone else is expressing jealousy toward us when we're on the receiving end of certain sharp comments, dismissive jokes, or loaded compliments, it's easy to internalize their words as a verdict on our character or success. But I want to offer a different lens. Jealousy isn't a verdict. It's a mirror. And if we can recognize it as such, we gain clarity, not just about others, but about ourselves. Jealousy doesn't show up wearing a name tag. It doesn't walk into a room announcing, "Hey, I'm insecurity," dressed as judgment. Instead, it comes out sideways. It sounds like, "Must be nice to have all that free time," or "Some people get all the luck," or "I don't know how you can afford that." At face value, these phrases seem harmless, maybe even observational. But under the surface, they're laced with something heavier. They carry the weight of someone else's internal narrative, stories they're telling themselves about not being enough, not having enough, or not doing enough. What I've learned through years of research into vulnerability, shame, and connection is that people often use judgment as armor. It feels safer to judge than to feel. It feels easier to criticize someone else's success than to sit with our own fear of inadequacy. So when jealousy rises up in someone else, it's rarely about us. It's about what our lives reflect back to them about their own unmet needs, their own deferred dreams, or their own hidden pain. We become, unwittingly, a mirror they're not prepared to look into. Now, this doesn't mean we should accept toxic behavior or let people project their pain onto us unchecked. But it does mean we can depersonalize it. Instead of shrinking under the weight of their words, or reacting with defensiveness or shame, we can pause. We can say to ourselves, "This isn't about me." And more importantly, we can choose to see the humanity in it. Because let's be honest, we've all been on both sides of this equation. We've all, at some point, felt that sting of jealousy. Maybe it was when someone got the promotion we wanted, or posted the vacation we couldn't afford, or seemed to have a relationship that looked effortless when ours was hanging by a thread. In those moments, if we're not grounded in our own worthiness, it's easy to let that envy slip into snarky comments or cold withdrawal. That's the mirror again, showing us something within ourselves that feels unfinished or unhealed. What's powerful, though, is that when we choose to view jealousy as a mirror, it becomes an invitation. It invites us to look deeper at what we value, what we fear, and what we might still be yearning for. If someone's success makes you feel small, the goal isn't to tear them down, it's to get curious about why that feeling is showing up. What part of you needs tending? What belief about your own worth is asking to be re-examined? The same principle applies when you're the one being judged. The people who try to reduce your achievements to luck, or make light of your effort, or question your motives, they're not offering insight. They're offering projection. And your job isn't to absorb it. Your job is to stay rooted in what you know to be true about your story. If you've worked hard, own that. If you've overcome something, honor that. If you've been blessed with opportunities and used them wisely, be grateful for that. But don't let someone else's discomfort with their own story rewrite yours. One of the most compassionate things we can do is recognize that jealousy is not a moral failure. It's an emotion. And all emotions are data. They're information, not instructions. The same is true when we encounter it in others. Instead of labeling someone as toxic the moment we detect envy, we can practice discernment. Is this a pattern? Is this person capable of self-awareness and growth? Or is this a relationship where boundaries need to be stronger? Boundaries, by the way, are essential here. Just because you understand someone's jealousy doesn't mean you have to tolerate unkindness. Compassion without boundaries is not empathy, it's enmeshment. You can be kind and clear at the same time. You can say, "That comment didn't sit right with me," or "I'd appreciate it if you didn't diminish what this means to me." That's not confrontation, that's courage. At the end of the day, the mirror of jealousy shows us where people are hurting. It shows us where healing hasn't yet happened, where stories are still being shaped by fear instead of wholeness. And when we encounter those moments, we have a choice. We can either absorb the judgment and let it take root in our spirit, or we can recognize it for what it is, a reflection, not a definition. You are not someone else's fear. You are not their regret. You are not their scarcity story. You are your own story. And if someone else sees in you something they wish they had, that's not a sign for you to shrink. That's a sign for them to look inward. And for you, it's an opportunity to stay the course, to lead with integrity, and to remember that your light doesn't diminish theirs. It simply reminds them that they have a light too. So, the next time you hear those familiar words, the ones that come dressed in comparison, or sarcasm, or quiet contempt, don't flinch. Don't fight. Just breathe. Recognize the mirror. And know that what they see has more to do with their reflection than your reality. When we interact with others, the words they speak often tell us much more than the surface level meaning. People, especially those struggling with jealousy, don't always express their emotions directly. Instead, they tend to mask their discomfort through phrases that seem benign or neutral at first glance. These common phrases, while innocuous on the outside, are often the emotional equivalent of a wound trying to speak. The truth is, the things people say when they are feeling jealous are rarely about you at all. They are windows into their own internal world, into their feelings of insecurity, inadequacy, fear, and pain. Let's start with one of the most common phrases, "You're just lucky." At first, this might sound like an offhand comment, perhaps said with a tone of envy or admiration. But when we peel back the layers, we begin to see the deeper message that's being conveyed. This statement is rarely a genuine reflection of someone's understanding of your achievements. Instead, it's a form of disempowerment. When someone says you're just lucky, what they're really saying is, I don't believe your hard work or talent had anything to do with your success. I can't reconcile my own feelings of inadequacy, so I'm going to place your success in a category that doesn't require me to acknowledge my own shortcomings. This statement, at its core, is an expression of scarcity thinking. The person who says it feels that the world's resources, whether that be success, love, or opportunity, are finite, and therefore, for someone to succeed, another must fail. It's a painful perspective, one rooted in the belief that there's not enough to go around. In this mindset, others' success feels like a threat, a reminder of what the jealous person believes they cannot have. So, when they say, "You're just lucky," they are, in a way, trying to protect themselves from confronting the larger truth, their own unresolved pain, their own unhealed wounds of perceived failure or missed opportunity. Another phrase we hear often is, "It must be nice." This one can be particularly insidious because it's often delivered in a seemingly casual way. It may be said with a half smile or a sigh, but underneath it, there's usually a layer of dissatisfaction or frustration. "It must be nice to have a perfect life," or "it must be nice to travel all the time," is more than a simple observation. It is a statement steeped in yearning and longing, mixed with a subtle accusation. What the person is really saying is, "I feel as though my life is not as fulfilling, and instead of acknowledging what I can do to change that, I am going to diminish your success and imply that you are somehow undeserving of it." This phrase also reveals a lack of agency. People who say, "It must be nice," may not consciously realize it, but they are essentially resigning themselves to a narrative of helplessness. They believe that other people's lives are marked by privilege or luck, while theirs is constrained by external circumstances. This lack of self-efficacy is often tied to deep-seated feelings of helplessness or failure, the kind that arises when we feel as though we've been overlooked, left behind, or denied opportunities. The person who says, "It must be nice," is not acknowledging that happiness, success, and fulfillment are not gifts bestowed upon the lucky few, but choices that are made through resilience, effort, and sometimes, difficult decisions. Then there's the phrase, "I don't know how you do it." This one is often said when someone is confronted with another person's ability to juggle work, family, or social commitments, often with an outward appearance of grace. On the surface, it seems like a compliment, a recognition of someone's impressive balancing act. But when examined closely, it reveals something else entirely, a sense of inadequacy. When someone says, "I don't know how you do it," they are expressing their own belief that they are somehow incapable of managing the same responsibilities, even though, deep down, they want to. This phrase exposes a fear of failure, a fear that they are not equipped to handle their own lives in the same way, or that they would never measure up to what they perceive as your effortless success. What's truly painful about this statement is that it implies the speaker has already decided they can't achieve the same things because they don't have the right tools, skills, or circumstances. It's an automatic response to their own feelings of inadequacy, a projection of the belief that they're not enough to handle life's challenges. Instead of offering empathy, they internalize their struggles as proof of their own limitations, and the simple act of seeing someone else juggle multiple roles becomes a reminder of their own self-doubt. And then we have the phrase, "You're so lucky to have that." This is one of the more overtly jealous statements, yet it's still commonly said with a veneer of politeness or even admiration. But underneath it lies a complex mix of envy and frustration. What the person is really expressing is that they see your success or happiness as something that they, for some reason, could never achieve. When they say, "You're so lucky to have that," they are downplaying your hard work, your struggles, and your journey. Instead, they are attributing your success to external, uncontrollable forces, luck, timing, or privilege, so they don't have to confront their own fears of failure or their own perception of scarcity. This phrase also signals a deep yearning to possess what someone else has, but with the added implication that such possession is out of reach. When someone says, "You're so lucky," it's often because they believe the path to success is closed off to them, leaving them stuck in a mindset of comparison and hopelessness. They may not realize it, but they're feeding into a cycle of self-pity and bitterness, which prevents them from embracing the possibility of their own growth and success. These common phrases, "You're just lucky," "It must be nice," "I don't know how you do it," and "You're so lucky to have that," may sound harmless, but they reveal something much deeper, a person's pain, their struggles, and their fears. Instead of being defensive or dismissive of these comments, we can choose to listen to them with empathy. They are, at their core, an invitation to understand the speaker's hidden wounds. They reflect someone's emotional state, their vulnerability, and their own unfinished story. When we approach jealousy with compassion and awareness, we can help transform these moments into opportunities for connection and healing. And in doing so, we can free ourselves from the need to internalize these comments as judgments of our worth or success. When we encounter jealousy, it can feel uncomfortable and even hurtful. The words people say in moments of envy, like "You're just lucky," or "It must be nice," often come across as thinly veiled criticisms or comparisons that leave us feeling defensive or misunderstood. In these situations, our instinct might be to shut down, to retreat behind walls we've built for protection, or to snap back in defense. After all, no one likes to feel judged or diminished. But what if I told you that the most powerful response to jealousy, whether it's directed at you or someone else, is vulnerability? Vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it's often the most courageous and transformative tool we have for diffusing tension, building connection, and fostering empathy. Vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in the face of jealousy, we can rewrite the entire narrative of how we relate to others and to ourselves. When jealousy arises in a conversation or interaction, we often feel the need to protect ourselves. We armor up. We want to shield our sense of self-worth from the sting of comparison or judgment. But this defense mechanism only exacerbates the situation. When we close ourselves off, we shut down the possibility for meaningful connection. We unintentionally create a barrier that makes it harder for the other person to connect with us on a deeper level. What if, instead of retreating or responding with sarcasm or defensiveness, we embraced vulnerability as a way to respond? What if we allowed ourselves to share the truth of our experiences, our feelings, and our humanity? Vulnerability is the act of showing up and being seen for who we truly are, without pretense or masks. It means letting go of the armor we put on to protect ourselves from judgment, and allowing ourselves to be open to whatever comes our way. When we are vulnerable, we are showing the world that we trust ourselves enough to be honest, even when it feels risky. In the context of jealousy, this means acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, that we are not perfect, and that our success or happiness doesn't come without its own struggles, sacrifices, or moments of doubt. In other words, vulnerability allows us to share our stories, our real, raw stories, instead of hiding behind a duh of perfection or superiority. Think about how we often respond to jealousy when we feel attacked or criticized. A common reflex is to protect our own ego by pushing back. We might respond with defensiveness, self-justification, or even sarcasm. This is a natural reaction. After all, we are wired to defend ourselves when we feel threatened. But defensiveness only fuels the cycle of tension. It raises the stakes of the conversation, creating more distance between us and the other person. When we respond from a place of vulnerability, however, we offer a different path forward. Vulnerability softens the edges of the situation, opening up space for understanding and connection. Imagine a scenario where a friend makes a comment about your recent promotion, saying something like, "Must be nice to get that promotion, some of us are just stuck in our jobs." Your initial response might be to counter with something like, "Well, I've been working hard for years, it wasn't just luck." You may feel the urge to prove that you earned your success, to defend your worth. But what if, instead of retaliating with a defensive response, you simply acknowledged the situation with vulnerability? You might say something like, "You know, it hasn't been easy. I've worked a lot of long nights and made sacrifices to get here, and honestly, it hasn't always felt like smooth sailing." This statement doesn't invalidate their feelings, but it opens up the conversation in a way that invites empathy and connection. You're offering a real, human response, one that acknowledges your success but also shares the truth of the journey. By being vulnerable, you invite the other person to see you as a person who has struggled, who has worked hard, and who is still navigating the complexities of success. You make it clear that their feelings of jealousy are understandable, and you humanize the situation. Vulnerability in response to jealousy is also an act of self-compassion. It requires us to be honest with ourselves about the pain or discomfort we feel in these situations. When we are able to embrace vulnerability, we allow ourselves to experience our emotions fully. We no longer try to bury our discomfort or pretend that we are unaffected by the judgment of others. Instead, we acknowledge our feelings of hurt, frustration, or confusion and give ourselves permission to feel them. This is not the same as letting jealousy or negativity control us, rather, it's about recognizing that our emotions are valid and worthy of attention. By embracing our own vulnerability, we create space for healing and growth. We allow ourselves to be seen not just by others, but by ourselves. And in doing so, we can start to release the need for validation or approval from external sources. Another powerful aspect of responding with vulnerability is that it shifts the focus from judgment to empathy. When we approach jealousy with openness and understanding, we can begin to see the deeper layers of what's at play. Jealousy often arises from feelings of inadequacy, fear, or unfulfilled desires. When we acknowledge the vulnerability in someone else's words or actions, we stop seeing them as threats, and we start seeing them as human beings who are also struggling. This shift in perspective allows us to show compassion, not just toward others, but toward ourselves as well. We begin to understand that jealousy is not a reflection of our worth, but rather a reflection of the pain and struggles the other person may be experiencing. And when we offer vulnerability in response, we create an opportunity for connection that transcends judgment. There is also something incredibly freeing about responding to jealousy with vulnerability because it removes the pressure to be perfect. We don't have to have it all figured out. We don't need to present an image of flawless success. We are allowed to be imperfect, to struggle, and to fail. In fact, it is in our vulnerability that we connect most deeply with others. When we share our true selves, the parts of us that are imperfect, flawed, and human, we invite others to do the same. We create space for mutual understanding, and in turn, we build stronger, more authentic relationships. Vulnerability is a radical act of courage. It requires us to let go of the need to control how others see us and to embrace the fullness of who we are, without apology. In the face of jealousy, vulnerability is an invitation to deepen our understanding of ourselves and others. It is a powerful tool that, when used with intention, can transform the way we experience judgment, criticism, and envy. It allows us to disarm the tension and create a space for empathy and connection. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that our worth is not defined by the opinions of others, but by the love and compassion we give ourselves, and the kindness we extend to those around us. By choosing vulnerability in these moments, we turn jealousy from a source of division into an opportunity for shared humanity. And that, I believe, is where true healing begins. Let me know if you'd like to expand on any other keynotes or if there's another aspect of the speech you'd like to work on. Envy is a complex emotion, one we don't often like to admit we feel, and certainly one we don't always know how to handle when it's directed at us. It can hide in sarcasm, come out in gossip, or disguise itself as indifference. But underneath it all, envy is often a sign of a deeper longing, an unmet need, or a dream that's been buried beneath years of fear, comparison, or self-doubt. What makes envy so powerful and so painful is that it reflects what we believe we are lacking. But what if we could transform that? What if instead of being a source of shame, envy could become a doorway to empathy both for ourselves and for others? To begin that transformation, we have to understand what envy is really trying to tell us. It's not just that someone else has something we want, it's that their success or happiness is touching a nerve in us, pointing to something inside that feels missing or inadequate. It might be someone's career achievement, their confidence, their relationships, or even the peace they seem to carry in their everyday life. Envy arises when we see something in someone else that we secretly or not so secretly desire for ourselves. The first step to transforming that feeling is to get curious about it instead of judging it. When envy shows up, we can pause and ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me about my own desires? What need or dream have I neglected? What wound is still unhealed? Most of us are taught to push envy away, to label it as petty or immature. But when we ignore it or suppress it, it doesn't go away, it festers. It shows up in passive-aggressive comments, in judgmental thoughts, or in the way we emotionally distance ourselves from the people who trigger it in us. But when we choose to look at envy with compassion and curiosity, we begin to see that it's not a moral failing, it's a signal. A signal that we are yearning for something more, or that we are living out of alignment with what truly matters to us. Transforming envy into empathy begins with that self-awareness. It means taking ownership of our emotions instead of projecting them onto others. It means recognizing that the discomfort we feel in response to someone else's success is more about our story than theirs. And when we do that, when we stop making others responsible for our pain, we create the space to grow. We begin to move from comparison to understanding, from criticism to compassion. Let's take a common example. You see someone you know achieving something you've always wanted. Maybe they've launched a business, written a book, or bought a home. Your first reaction might be a pang of resentment. But if you dig deeper, you might find that the real emotion underneath is sadness or fear. Sadness because you haven't pursued your own dream, or fear that you're running out of time. That's the deeper truth envy can reveal. Once you name that truth, you have the power to act on it. Maybe it's time to start writing that book, or take that risk you've been avoiding. In this way, envy becomes not a reason to withdraw, but a motivation to move forward. And it doesn't stop with how we respond to our own envy. Transforming envy into empathy also changes how we respond when others seem envious of us. It's easy to get defensive when people minimize our success or make dismissive comments. It hurts when we feel unseen or misunderstood. But when we recognize that their words might be coming from a place of pain rather than malice, we can respond differently. We can choose to see the human behind the words, the person who might be struggling, comparing, or feeling left behind. That doesn't mean we tolerate disrespect or let others diminish our worth. But it does mean we can meet their envy with boundaries and empathy, rather than ego. Responding with empathy doesn't mean diminishing our joy or apologizing for our success. It means being grounded enough in our own story that we can hold space for others without needing to shrink ourselves. When we understand that everyone is carrying something invisible, some unmet hope or hidden insecurity, we stop making everything personal. We realize that we're all just trying to navigate life the best we can, and that sometimes, our pain spills over in ways we don't intend. This transformation from envy to empathy creates more than just internal peace. It changes relationships. It builds community. It invites deeper connection. Because when we are no longer driven by competition or comparison, we can genuinely celebrate others. And that celebration becomes reciprocal. When people feel seen and supported instead of judged, they begin to show up more authentically too. And that authenticity fuels connection like nothing else can. Empathy also allows us to offer ourselves the compassion we so easily give to others. Because often, we're hardest on ourselves. We beat ourselves up for not being there yet, for not measuring up to some imagined standard of success. But when we allow empathy into the conversation, we remember that growth takes time. That we are allowed to be in process. That we are not failures for having doubts or envy or dreams we haven't acted on yet. Empathy says, you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. And when we believe that, it's easier to extend that grace to others too. In a culture that thrives on comparison and scarcity, choosing empathy is a radical act. It's a way of saying, there's enough for all of us. Enough success. Enough love. Enough space to grow. When we shift from envy to empathy, we stop seeing life as a race and start seeing it as a shared journey. One where your win doesn't mean my loss. One where your joy doesn't threaten mine, it expands it. Ultimately, transforming envy into empathy is not about pretending we never feel jealous or insecure. It's about what we do with those feelings. Do we let them build walls between us, or do we let them open doors to deeper understanding? The choice is always ours. And when we choose empathy toward ourselves, and toward others, we create a world where connection matters more than competition, and where we are free to become the fullest versions of who we are. If you found value in this message, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world and helps us grow this community of self-awareness and growth. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep rising.